So quote me on this, October 7th, Mando's prediction,
I got you.
Bitcoin, 120K.
Someone mentioned to me once, well, we just need to ban AI. We need to make sure or slow it down so that we can't use
Yeah,
it. I'm like, well,
that,
that's maybe
that
not the
never
right
works.
approach. That's
No,
not
no,
that's not really the right approach, right?
we open Pandora box and you can't. It's like now, if you start prohibiting in some areas, you're not now competitive because guess what? Maybe other countries, right? Asia or whatever, they will start keep using it. Or if they ban it there, we are in an advantage. So I think that usually those type of measurements don't work, blocking or banning things.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
mean, you
So
you remember like in Bitcoin, they actually China tried to ban it and almost and they were and that didn't work, right? So
I think they banned it about 48 times already or something like that.
it's like this is ban number 40.
Oh, that's too funny. Well,
So,
speaking of Bitcoin, I think there was some other news about
mhm.
BlackRock, right?
Yeah.
So I think we've mentioned it before that there's these ETFs that are coming up. There's been a lot of applications by big companies. We talked about BlackRock that are trying to get an ETF approved. So that they can allow institutional buyers, basically other big companies, hedge fund people, to buy Bitcoin themselves, so they can include it into their accounts, basically. So there's an insider that leaked some information that said, hey, they think it's going to happen, and maybe within the next 3 to 6 months. And BlackRock, for those of y'all that don't remember, they have over $17 trillion of managed funds. So even if they put just a small percentage of that, even just 1% into Bitcoin, that's gonna be a big boon for that. And BlackRock's not the only one. There's several other companies that are
Hmm.
doing the same thing.
So quote me on this, October 7th, Mando's prediction,
I got you.
Bitcoin, 120K. I think that it's just a pattern that I see that usually I see that is doubling, and the volatility will continue to diminish, right? In some point, will stabilize, but I don't think that we will have a 90% uh, drop
Drawdown.
like in drawdown in like in the previous cycles. But again, I'm not a financial advisor. Do your own research. We are some only two dudes in the internet.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Well, we weren't far off from the 90%. I think we probably hit 80% drawdown. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a substantial amount from the last side around 70K, right? So
Yep. But again, nobody could predict it, right? I mean, who will predict it that COVID was there, right? So nobody. So,
well,
but
I- well, some people may have, right? But no, that's a different story. We're going down a different rabbit hole there. But yeah, but just remember, for those of y'all that are maybe a little bit newer to Bitcoin, there's cycles to it because of the halving. So there's a big event in Bitcoin called the halving that's coming up. We think it's going to be around April of 2024. It has to do with the algorithm that runs Bitcoin.
mhm.
Basically, for all the miners that are out there that are um, working to secure the network, their reward for doing that work is going to get halved. So I think it's going to go to 6 Bitcoin or 6.25 Bitcoin in April, something like that, right?
It is the last chunk of bitcoins. Basically, we are 90%, 95% of the all of the Bitcoin mined. So it is 20. How mmany? 20 millions.
21 million total.
Yeah, in total. But
Over, but like the last half a million are going to be over the next 100 years or something like that. I don't know.
yeah, yeah.
It's a long tail,
Quantum
long tail.
quantum computing, right? And I think that that's kind of the other portion, right? If you think about it, we are almost 8 billion people in the world, and that's the reason why some of the very basic uh, splitting on this, it is to make sure. And again, when if you are new to Bitcoin, it's not that you have to or you must have a one Bitcoin. In theory, you can have a Satoshi, which is a very, very tiny fraction of a Bitcoin. So that's what we're gonna see. There is actually a nice meme that is showing the progression and pricing for Bitcoin, and it's like one of the webcomic. It says, "Oh, he's a Bitcoiner, has one whole Bitcoin." Because in some point that's what is going to happen if price continues to raise, right? Maybe one Bitcoin in some point in so many years might be 1 million, right? So and that's the reason why you want to have some fractions of it as well.
That's right. There's some people out there that try to do the calculations about, well, how much Bitcoin do you need to like be well off in the future, maybe over the next 10 years, let's call it.
Mm,
A lot of people say, well, if you have 0.28 Bitcoin, like you've made it. That's really the new goal. Just because having one full Bitcoin right now seems pretty far off for a lot of people, because right now it's what 25, 26,000, something like that. It goes
yeah,
up and down every day, right? But
yeah,
so people have set those goals, and again, if it hits that 1 million here within by 2030 or something like that, a lot of people are well, $280,000. That's going to be, that's enough to a down payment on a house, depending on how big of a house, or a whole house for a lot of people. So
yeah,
that's what how people are seeing it. But there's three things that are maybe at this point that are culminating right now that could drive the price up. So one of them is again these ETFs that we mentioned. There's a lot of big hedge funds that are about to make a big investment. They're just waiting for the SEC to approve all of these ETFs, and they're saying they'll likely approve them all at the same time. That way,
yeah.
not one of them has a bit of like timing
An
advantage.
advantage. Mhm.
So that's one thing. Another thing is just kind of the inflation. If there continues to be inflation, which there seems there could be, there's a war that just broke out this morning. Um, all of those things tend to drive inflation and things like that. The country start printing more money, so that drives inflation. So if inflation is going up, usually Bitcoin gets stronger. That's just what we've seen historically. And then the third thing is the thing that we mentioned. It's the halving, right? There's going to be less Bitcoin that's being created on a daily basis, mined on a daily basis. So the value is going to go up because scarcity's going up. There's going to be less Bitcoin to go around for the people that are trying to buy more. So those three things are coming together here over the next year and a half, and usually that's what you see. I do also want to add. So there's been some analysis by I think Plan B. Plan B
Mhm.
is one of the guys that has made some of these models that show kind of where the trajectory of Bitcoin is going. But he's said that like a good time to get into Bitcoin is usually at least six. I think he says 6 months before a halving. That's usually going to be around where your bottom is. So if the halving is going to occur in April of 2024, then now is probably a good time to get into Bitcoin. And we've seen that it's kind of stabilized at around this
Mhm.
25 to 28K range. And then the high then goes on for, I think he says, a year and a half after the halving, so 18 months post halving. That takes us into, I think, 2025, and that's where he says likely the height of this cycle will
Recycle.
be. And then it starts over again. But uh, all the site like like Ben, what's his name, Benjamin, into the cryptoverse. He's got a YouTube channel
Mhm.
out there.
Yeah.
Forget his last name, but like he says, these Bitcoin cycles, they're not necessarily a copy of each other, but they do rhyme. So you'll
Mhm.
see these cycles behave in certain ways. And he has a very good macroeconomic view on it. If you want to
Yeah.
get a little bit more into the analysis.
If you're into that, he does a nice. It's called technical analysis. There are many ways to buy stocks or buy assets, and he likes to kind of study in a. Uh, there are a couple different ways. Like one way is fundamentals that you start seeing macroeconomy and all of that, and the other one is with technical analysis. And this guy checks both. So his channel is good. So shout out to him.